I won't claim to know much about Haiti. I was merely reading interesting, seemingly trustworthy facts about it. If you're a Haitian or just an individual who knows a lot about Haiti, I'm totally open to being corrected on anything in this post. Apparently, it was the crown jewel of France, the most prosperous Caribbean nation before France abolished slavery. Some mixed breeds, like myself, were granted freedom beforehand, however, on a case by case scenario. There was the Haitian Revolution, leading to the slaughter of all the French inhabitants there. In response, in exchange for acknowledging their independence rather than France merely sending more troops to reconquer it, Haitians were sanctioned to the point of economic destitution, while U.S. Marines took money from the country in a way and context I'm not very educated in. I just know that that money indirectly led to the funding of the Statue of Liberty. The Haitians, with their acknowledged independence, basically squandered their freedom. They brain drained themselves in various ways by excommunicating and or slaughtering their most intelligent and educated human resources, e.g. the Galileo effect, as they were simultaneously forced to drain their own natural resources, e.g. deforestation. Several attempts throughout history to rebuild Haiti into its former glory have failed. It's gradually slipped back generation after generation into pre-France squalor. I take interest in stories like these because of everything I'm doing with myself in mind. History sheds a bit of insight into what to expect in the future pertaining to my ideas. It also sheds insight into why me and the vast majority of black people don't actually get along. To a lot of them, because I am Caribbean, I am the mulatto, quote unquote, who would have likely been granted or more easily earned freedom for one reason or another before slavery would have been abolished. This is the quote unquote exceptionalism social theory that many left wingers have. I am an exception, quote unquote, that is given preferential treatment in their eyes. Now, I built my company with my own two hands. I lived in the Chinese wilderness, mostly alone, and overcame what the average person would have died from in both winters and summers. I owned everything I am and have in life. But people like me and my progeny will always be viewed as a kind of privileged exception, a kind of arrogant cultural royalty whose personal advancements will be despised and enviously rationalized no matter how noble our intent or how hard we worked. I have no other advantage but my own genes. I've earned everything else, even what little social acceptance I do indeed have. Despite that, when I read the story of Haiti, I don't see a story worth pitying. I see a story in which I would have been one of those brain drained from Haiti, murdered right alongside the pure blooded French, which I too descend from, being as though I am Caribbean, as my father was mixed with them, and thrown into a ditch with my innocent children by the Haitians, not the Europeans. Unless I overcompensated with false blackness, quote unquote, to appease their collective ego, kneecapping myself and repressing my true thoughts for survival, which I've done before when I was much younger and didn't know any better with weaker character. Then some whites who would have truly known me would have understood why someone like me would have taken that path of lesser resistance, taking a side against them. They would have hanged their heads low, disappointed but understanding, just hoping I would have had the courage to stoically choose to die with the honor of my true self instead. And then the story would have been buried, the third angle of perception lost, if not distorted beyond recognition if I were to accomplish things in the name of black people with non black genes, thereby reinforcing the Jim Crowian politics of the one drop rule because of the cowardice, the sheer cowardice of other people like me in history who lacked the courage to stay their own natural course. Is the underlying thought behind concepts like the one drop rule really because we have one drop of black in us? Or is it more deeply under the surface in many scenarios because the assumption underneath would be that someone like me would always abandon the European when pressed for survival and forced to choose a side? So it was best for the European survival rate not to become emotionally attached because of that link if people like me would abandon them when the going actually got tough. All because people like me have simply lacked backbone throughout history. To remain standing, challenging the idea, standing on the principle of who and what you actually are, despite knowing what's coming for you. That's the reality of history for people like me. That's the reality I went through growing up. Who was truly crueler to me and for what reasons? From whom did I actually have to hide? No, I would gladly choose to die now, and black people would actually punish themselves for it, most without even realizing how. Case in point, Haiti today.